All right, hi Rich, hi Richie. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. Today is April 6th, 2013. I just wanted to go over two quick ground rules before we got started. The first is right now this conversation is being recorded, and after the recording is completed, we'll be uploading this video to YouTube, to the internet. Is that okay with both of you?
Yeah. That's fine.
Okay, great. And then on top of that, here at Vonvo, we don't want our discussions to have any personal attacks. We want it to stay civil and valuable. Are you guys fine with that ground rule?
Yeah. As long as you don't say anything I disagree with. Well.
All right, well, so going into that, guys, so I wanted to start the conversation off. Richie, would you mind just giving a quick background of yourself to any of our viewers and why you're passionate about this topic? And then, Rich, you can go ahead and do the same thing.
Sure. Well, I am Richie. I live in Arab North Africa at the moment. I'm from the UK. I've lived in Israel for a number of years in the past. I've also lived in some Arab countries. Just very passionately interested in very well travelled throughout the Middle East, and got a lot of friends on both sides of the fence, and trying my best to help out to try and get a peaceful resolution for this conflict, I guess.
Right. And Rich, can you go ahead and do the same thing?
Yeah, I'm Jewish. I have ultra-Orthodox relatives living in Israel. I'm a former member of AIPAC. I used to believe all the arguments that are constantly made against Israeli behavior and Israeli policy. And then I decided, you know what? I hadn't really studied the issue. I just took the word of my rabbis, teachers, the media, and AIPAC for what was really going on. But I haven't studied the issue myself, so I began to study it myself intensively, using primarily, probably 99%, Israeli government and Israeli archive material. And what I discovered was that I had been misled, misinformed, and that most of what I believed was that everything that I believed, every single argument I'd ever heard and made myself, and I heard them all, every single argument made to defend Israel was either a gross fabrication or a gross distortion of reality taken out of context. And so because I see that Israel is on a self-destructive course that is harmful not just to the Palestinians, so primarily to the Palestinians, but harmful to itself, to the United States, and to the world, I decided I had to add my voice to bring some clarity to this issue.
Great. So ultimately then, that's more than fine. I'm sure those items will get brought up. What I wanted to really sort of bring up first to begin was, the recent visit by Obama to Israel. Richie, when you took note of Obama appearing in Israel and Jerusalem, what were your thoughts on his trip, and does he seem serious about peace?
Okay, well, I think I probably always am a loggerheads with most Israelis. Obama has generally quite a negative impression in Israel, because they feel that he's really aligning himself with the Muslim Brotherhood and giving a lot of aid to Egypt and helping the rebels in Syria and stuff like that. I very much enjoyed his speech to the students. I thought it was well placed. I think he's serious about wanting to make peace. I don't think the Palestinians particularly enjoyed his visit from the reports I read in the press. I think he said the right things about Israel. I think he said the right things about a two-state solution. I'm sure Rich won't agree with me, but I was on the whole, I was heartened by his visit, let me say that.
Okay, and Rich, how about you do the same?
Well, I had no expectations that Obama would do anything of substance, and he proved me right. I mean, first of all, he's telling the Israelis to stand in the shoes of the Palestinians, and he's telling me that especially the younger Israelis to make their leaders, make decisions that will bring about peace. But he himself is doing nothing to prevent the settler movement in the right wing of Israel from preventing peace. For example, he didn't say anything about Israel's violations of international law. He provides Israel with even more money than they're already getting so that they can maintain the occupation and violate international law. And so what he was doing was, he was trying to get the young citizens of Israel in a way that he knows will never succeed. He was trying to get the young citizens of Israel to do what he's either afraid of doing or knows is impossible to do because of the political climate in the United States. And I just want to mention one thing. He's not aligning himself with the Muslim Brotherhood. The United States has given billions of dollars to Egypt for many, many years to prop up the Mubarak regime. And I'm sure with the consent and wholehearted support of the Israeli government. Of course, they don't give as much money to, the United States does not give anywhere near as much money to Egypt as it gives to Israel. But he has not aligned himself with the Muslim Brotherhood. He has really pretty much, to a very great extent, aligned himself with the Likud party of Israel.
Well, Rich, I would imagine that one of the reasons that he doesn't give as much money to Egypt as to Israel is because Egypt is threatened with destruction every other day by every country that's surrounding it.
All the countries that surround Israel are threatened by destruction from Israel. Israel has 200 to 400 nuclear weapons. Israel has made it clear, beginning with Golda Meir, that it would take the world with it if it thought that it was in danger. The cries of Israel being in existential danger are dishonest and deceitful. Israel is in no existential danger, but you know what? If Israel wanted to ensure that it was more safe and secure, it would make peace. Something it has always avoided, despite the rhetoric, the public rhetoric of Israel's leaders. Israel has never wanted to make peace. Israel has always used peace negotiations as a camouflage to hide its true intentions, which is the acquisition of more and more Palestinian land for a greater Israel. All you have to do is read the Likud Party platform, for example, to see that the Likud Party rejects the idea of a Palestinian state and calls for the eastern border of Israel to be the Jordan River, which means it would take over the entire West Bank. And that's actually a moderate position compared to some of the Likud leaders, such as Yitzhak Shamir and even Sharon, and it's a moderate position compared to what Ben Gurion wanted originally. Though Ben Gurion did change his mind after he was retired much later in his life. Well, let me just add one thing. The problem in this discussion, not this personal discussion, but the problem in the overall discussion between people who defend Israel and people who are critical of Israel and want peace for both sides and equality and human rights for both sides, is that the people who defend Israel, and I'm being kind here, have never researched the issue. If they actually have researched the issue and they still hold these opinions, then they are really guilty of crimes against humanity. But most people have simply taken for granted that what the state of Israel tells them is true, when in fact it is not.
Richie, go ahead and respond to any of that.
Well, I mean, obviously I'd have to disagree with that. I lived in Israel for 15 years, and I think I've researched the issue quite well. I mean, are you saying that anybody who disagrees with that position, Rich, is therefore what?
No, I never said that. I just made a few statements of fact.
I don't see how you can level at me or other people that we haven't researched. How long have you lived in Israel ever?
No, but so what? Obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu has lived in Israel a long time. So have many of the ideological settlers who attack Palestinians in their homes with the army looking on. I mean, what does that have to do with it? You can be indoctrinated into any point of view, and if you're indoctrinated into any point of view, no matter how false, you're going to believe it until you break free from the chains of that point of view. And the way to do that is to research the history, not take for granted that what you want to believe is what is true. And that is the problem. People who defend Israel, for the most part, have either not researched it at all, or their research has been so biased that they simply find material that reinforces their pre-existing and false beliefs. I'm asking you to do real research, real, honest, and objective research, so that you no longer contribute to human rights abuses and crimes against humanity. That is what I'm asking of you. I mean, we can go over a number of the arguments that people make that I assume Max would, that I assume that Richie would probably have in his arsenal. We can go over these arguments and show just how deceitful or totally false these arguments are.
Right. So ultimately, though, I guess, what I would ask next is, so in terms of some of the recent things that have been going on inside of Israel, so recently there's been some airstrikes from the Israeli side, and the Israeli government's accused, missiles being launched out of Gaza, and that's what they're retaliating from. Do you think that ultimately?
It's not a question of. It's not a question of being accused. It's a fact on the ground. There was a truce and a truce agreement signed at the end of the last operation. And Hamas, even when Barack Obama was in Israel, decided to probably even they actually saying it wasn't even Hamas, but it was a faction in Gaza. Started firing missiles again. They fired, I think, 2 or 4. One landed in a kindergarten, in fact, while Obama was in Israel. And then Israel reacted to that, not by shooting Palestinians. I mean, Rich, I don't know where you get the idea that it's just the settlers. You're creating a very one-sided viewpoint.
No, I didn't say
it's coming out of Gaza.
Rich, let's
talk about the rocket, the projectiles coming out of Gaza. First of all, I didn't say it was only the settlers. The settlers are among the most right-wing of the dogmatic Israeli public that promotes never-ending conflict with the Palestinians until there is a full and final ethnic cleansing. So let's talk about rockets. Yes, there have been some projectiles that have been launched out of Gaza. In almost every case, though, they have been in retaliation for something. Now, I'm not condoning the launching of these projectiles, but if Israel thinks that it can kill Palestinians, okay, which they did, they killed 2 teenagers, and then on average 6 days a week they invade, their tanks go into Gaza. I was in Gaza in November. On average 6 days a week, Israeli tanks enter Gaza, sometimes shooting indiscriminately, like when they killed Hamid Abu Dhaka, the 12-year-old boy, on November 8th, which was the precipitating event that led to Operation Pillar of Cloud. Hamid Abu Dhaka was killed in front of his home playing soccer. I attended his funeral the next day. So let's talk about truces and projectile launches. First of all, a study by the University of Tel Aviv in conjunction with MIT and Harvard showed that of all the truces between Israel and the Palestinian side, 79% have been unilaterally violated and broken by Israel. 8% have been unilaterally violated and broken by the Palestinian side, with the remaining 13% by both sides on the same day. Of these truces that lasted, I think, more than a week, all 25 or 24 or 25 of them, 100%, were violated and broken by Israel. And then speaking of rocket attacks, we can't just look at the rocket attacks from renegade groups that are ignoring Hamas's orders. Yes, there were 2 projectiles shot into Israel. So let's look at this. According to the Israeli Terrorism and Intelligence Information Center, between 2000 and the end of 2008, Palestinian groups launched a total of 8,088 rockets and mortars into Israel. Okay, these are mostly homemade rockets and mortars. I've seen them on the ground. I've seen the holes they cause in the ground. They're the size of they're maybe less than a foot in diameter. Contrast those 8,000 rockets and mortars over 9 years with the nearly 8,000 infinitely more destructive rockets that Israel launched in Gaza in just 9 months between September 2005 and June 2006. Yes, in 9 months, Israel launched as many rockets into Gaza as the Gazans had launched into Israel. The difference being that Israel's are far, far more lethal and far more destructive. So you can't. So if you want to talk about being one-sided, you've got to look at both sides, okay, before you start accusing being one-sided. I used to quote everything you're saying, Richie, was an argument I used to make. There's no argument you're going to make that I haven't made myself. But then I did honest research and found out that I was deluding myself because I was believing people who were deceiving me. And they deceived you too. And if you really want to retain your humanity, you will find out what is real and what is false. Because otherwise, you are supporting human rights abuses and the ethnic cleansing of an indigenous people and the character assassination of an indigenous people.
So what are you saying is the solution then, Rich? I mean, we are doing just spewing hatred. I mean,
wait a second. Who is spewing hatred? Who is spewing hatred? Is setting the record straight? Is being honest with facts? Is that spewing hatred? Or supporting a government and a settler movement that daily abuses Palestinians, women, men, and children, that walks into their homes, destroys their furniture, abuses them physically, tortures them, arrests little children, blindfolds little children, kills people? Who is spouting hatred? I'll tell you, the answer is human rights, international law. Why should Israel be exempt from international law? Why should Israel and Israel's supporters believe that they are the only country in the world that can show contempt for international law? If Israel abided by international law, or if people like you who support Israel insisted that the Israeli government abide by international law, this problem could be solved.
Well, so, Rich, do you have a response?
I'll ask you again. Rich, I asked you before, and you haven't answered me. What you're saying, what are you saying is the solution then? What are you saying is the solution? If Israel is for, what is the solution? If you want to ignore the terrorism coming out of Gaza,
I'm not ignoring anything.
Guys. For the video's purposes, just the speaking over one another is not going to work. So, Rich, just let Richie finish his point, and then you'll counter whatever you'd like with it, and then and then Richie, you'll do the same. So, Richie, finish your point, and we can go into solutions. It's not a problem, unless you want to bring up anything specific which Rich is mentioning, Richie. But go ahead.
I finished my point. I was asking Rich, based on on what he's saying, what does he think the solution is then?
All right. Well, let me answer that. First of all, I don't use the word terrorism. There are extremist groups. There are extremist Muslim groups. There are extremist Palestinian groups that use violence, and I do not condone that. Okay? But look at this government of Israel. The government of Israel has always used violence as a tool to humiliate and ethnically cleanse the Palestinians and to make them feel that they have no hope. In fact, Israel's greatest military strategist, Ze'ev Schiff, who is revered by the entire spectrum of Israeli leaders, from the left to the right, Ze'ev Schiff, and not just Ze'ev Schiff, but Ze'ev Schiff admitted that Israel has always targeted civilians. Now that's terrorism. And he isn't the only one. Former Israel Defense Forces Chief of Staff, Mordecai Gur, admitted that Israel has always targeted civilians. And he's not the only one. Even the far-right wing, Raphael Eitan, the severely far-right wing, Raphael Eitan, who succeeded Mordecai Gur and was Chief of Staff when Israel, in 1982, when the Palestinian refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila were destroyed and thousands of Palestinians killed in Lebanon, Even Raphael Eitan admitted later in life that that he didn't believe in peace because if they had done to us what we did to them, we would never make peace. Now, regarding the solution, first of all, as a basis for any solution, there has to be a commitment to the law. There has to be a commitment to international law, especially those conventions, such as the Geneva Convention, that have been signed onto by the state of Israel. Israel thumbs its nose at international law. But Israel, Richie, I mean, I'm not criticizing you for defending Israel. I'm not criticizing you or questioning your love of Israel. That, to me, your love of Israel is admirable. But what I am questioning and what I am criticizing is blind support for a government that has been deceiving all of us and has been leading us to believe that it wants peace when in fact it does everything possible to prevent peace. Now, if there was a commitment to international law, if both sides honored international law, then they could make, now I personally would prefer to see a one-state solution with Palestinians and Israelis living side by side. I would want there to be a number of educational tools in place, such as I would like all schools, public and private, for the Arab population, the Palestinian population to learn Hebrew, and the Jewish population to learn Palestinian. I would like to have cultural exchanges. I would like both sides to hear the real history of the other side. And I believe that if people could see the other, if they could see, if there was no wall preventing them from seeing each other, they would see that they are very similar.
Richie, do you hear Rich?
Hello? Yeah, I heard him. I was just waiting for an opportunity to jump in, but he seems to have frozen somewhere. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. It looks like it looks like he's frozen. So, do you want to maybe respond to Rich? Do you hear us?
Oh yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd love to respond to that.
30 more seconds. Let me just finish this. The Saudi peace initiative, which Israel completely has ignored, offers a peace between Israel and the Palestinians on the basis of the 1967 line, with full security guarantees for all the states of the region and full normalized diplomatic relations between Israel and not only the entire Arab world, but the entire Muslim world. I think that's a great basis, along with international law, for a peace to be achieved and for the suffering to end.
Richie, go ahead. And
okay, but I missed about 3 or 4 minutes of your speech, Rich. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the last 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, I want to try and not be impolite, but coming from you and saying that Israel targets civilians when it's been proved 1,000 times over. I mean, you probably saw even the speech in the United Nations by the independent British commander of Afghan forces, whose speech I'm more than happy to send you, who said that in the recent campaign, Israel spent the most care of any force, the IDF, in modern warfare history about making sure to avoid civilian casualties. When you have Palestinians putting kids in the way and putting bombs in, missiles coming out of mosques and putting kids in the way, I mean, there's so much really, I could just go on for hours. But for you to stand there really to say that it's Israel the IDF targeting civilians and the Palestinians don't target civilians, I find completely incongruous. And you don't mention that the
Go.
And you don't mention, I mean, it's not a story about Syria. We're not going to bring Syria into this discussion, I assume. But I mean, how many Palestinians are being murdered and terrorized in Syrian refugee camps right now by fellow Arabs? I mean, why does nobody talk about that? Thousands and thousands of Palestinians being killed on a weekly, just let me finish please. Thousands and thousands are being killed on a weekly basis in Syria by the Arab regimes there. And also, I just want to mention one other thing. I share, you may not agree with me, I share many of your aspirations. I would love to see Israel recognized by all the countries in the Arab world. I think it might start with some of the Arab countries actually recognizing Israel's right to exist. Wouldn't that be a good start?
Well, some of them have.
Well, who has? Please tell me. Jordan.
Well, Jordan
has.
Well, Jordan.
Peace treaty.
No, let me tell you. Jordan and Egypt, as part of their peace treaties, recognized Israel's right to exist. But the reason Hamas does not recognize Israel's right to exist is because what Israel would they be recognizing? Israel has never defined its borders. Hamas cannot recognize the right of a country to exist. Country is gobbling up more and more and more of their own people's land. Why doesn't Israel recognize the right of Palestinian people to exist? Why does and by the way, Richard, I never said, excuse me, I need to correct some of the misstatements you've made. I never said that Israel targets civilians. I said that Israel's chiefs of staff and military strategists have said that they target civilians, and you made another statement that is a myth, which is you said that Hamas uses children as human hostages. No, that's not true. Israel used Palestinians as human hostages. And by the way, Israel even admitted General Gadi Eisenkot, the chief of the Northern Command, just a few weeks before Operation Cast Lead, said that any missiles coming from Gaza would be treated as being an attack by the civilian population, and that they would attack civilians. And then that's exactly what they did. Over 70% of the people killed during Operation Cast Lead, and over 50% during Pillar of Cloud, who were killed by Israel's 99% precise rockets, were civilians. And it's another myth that Hamas was shooting rockets out of mosques. The mosques, they were not shooting rockets out of Hamas. Israel targeted mosques, but the mosques had not been shooting rockets. There was, in fact, what's the thing called, the towers? Israel was shooting at these towers, even though the towers were too small for anyone to have any rocket batteries there. I mean, everything you're saying is not true. That British commander didn't know what he was talking about. But even if he did, if they're going to say that it's all right for Israel to kill Palestinians because they're not as evil as Saddam Hussein, or they're not as evil as the Syrians, or they're not as evil as Milosevic, Milosevic and Saddam Hussein should be exonerated because they weren't as evil as Joseph Stalin or Adolf Hitler. I mean, this idea of moral equivalence does not change the fact that Israel has been on a daily basis for generations committing human rights abuses against the Palestinians and preventing their self-determination and discriminating against them through Israeli law. The Palestinians made an extraordinarily generous offer to the Palestinians of 94 to 96% of the West Bank and all of Gaza, and that the Palestinians rejected it because they have no interest in peace. Now, that is totally false. What really happened is that Israel never presented a single map or a single written proposal to the Palestinians, number one. Number two, Ehud Barak at Camp David refused to speak with Yasser Arafat except for one time when he was willing to accept Arafat under the condition that nothing of substance be discussed. Bill Clinton and Dennis Ross, the United States chief Middle East negotiator at the time, lied to the public by blaming Arafat for the failure of Camp David. They did that because they wanted to support Ehud Barak in his re-election campaign against Ariel Sharon. When the Camp David summit failed, Clinton came out with his parameters, what was known as the Clinton parameters. Those were the basis of the discussions in January of 2001 in Tava, during which Ehud Barak eventually bolted, to use the words of former IDF chief of staff and Israeli negotiator Amnon Shifkin Shahak, who said that it was just an election issue for Barak. That when he saw that he was trying to get the Arab vote, and when he saw that he had no chance against Sharon, he bolted. Okay, so that is a false myth. The 2000 Camp David summit is a false myth. The best that Israel offered, if you take into account the buffer zones around the settlements and water and natural parks for Jews only, was that the Palestinians might have ended up, maybe, if the Knesset had agreed, which they wouldn't have, with 65% of the 22% of historic Palestine. Another myth is the idea that Arab leaders...
Rich, just because now we have Richie back. Richie, do you hear Rich?
Yeah, I can hear fine. Yeah.
Okay, because your internet.
I just had a computer problem. We had a. Can you hear me? Okay, Max?
Yeah, I hear you great. Rich, do you hear Richie?
I hear him, but it's kind of.
Could you make your volume louder again, Richie? You're probably back on the half sound.
Yeah. Okay, that's better.
Okay, so Richie, just.
Okay, first of all, just quickly, we had a lightning strike here. We just had a lightning strike, and it just blew the fuses on the electricity. And I was connected to the electricity, so I wasn't trying to run away from Rich's comment. But I wouldn't mind. One of the comments that I saw before I disappeared was that I'm not putting any solution forward, and I'd like to maybe just take the opportunity, if Rich would allow me, just to say a couple of things just for a couple of minutes, and put forward my own theories on that one, if that's okay with him.
Yeah.
Sure.
Definitely, go ahead.
Okay, cool. Well, first of all, Rich, you're saying that Israel wants to have up until the Jordan River, the west bank of the Jordan River, and there are factions in Israel that want that. I'm not part of the faction that wants that. There are a lot of people in Israel who say that it's not the West Bank, it's Judea and Samaria. It's not Palestinian territory, never has been. It's disputed territory. I don't want to go into that. What I want to say today, and I think the purpose of Vonvo is to draw people like you and people like me who have opposing views and try and find some way that it's a very emotive subject and try and get through to a peace agreement. I mean, I'm just interested that you don't say anything about the map of Palestine, which is now on the Palestine flag, which encompasses the whole of Israel. So if we're going to talk about people trying to land grab, I think you need to have a slightly more balanced view. Now, regarding peace and regarding what the solution is, I agree with Obama. I think the only way is a Palestine nation living in peace and security. I don't think the 67 borders are workable. I've lived in that part of the world, and a country that's 9 kilometers wide at one point, I don't think is defendable. But on the face of it, I think there could be compromise on Jerusalem. I think I disagree with a lot of Israelis that want to maintain Jerusalem as an undivided city. I think that I would have personally no problem in Jerusalem being the capital of the new Palestinian state, and Jerusalem also being the capital of what it is already, of the Jewish-Israeli state. And as part of that thing, yeah, there should be mutual recognition of existence and mutual recognition of Israel's right to exist, especially by countries, that currently, I know you said about Egypt, and it's written in Egypt's constitution, it recognizes Israel's right to exist, except that Morsi is currently trying to put through the Egyptian parliament to have that agreement ripped up. And it's only the Americans that are stopping him doing that by the amount of aid that they are trying to pour into Egypt at this time. So somebody was saying on the post, I'm not here now, because I lost it when I disappeared, that I'm not putting forward any concrete for peace. Two states, I don't think the one-state solution is workable, Rich. I think it's a fantasy. I lived in Israel for a while when, in the 1980s, when peace was really at its best stage, when I used to go and play football every weekend with our Palestinian neighbours. There was no problems at all. I lived right on the green line. And I would love to see those days back again. But the problem is that there seems to be, I I think the main problem is you see no voice from the Palestinian side of moderation. You see nobody that's coming forward from the Palestinian side and offering peaceful and constructive statements. And I think that's a real problem. And I think there's a problem on the Israeli side as well, because there are also a lot of people who are not putting forward those constructive solutions. The settlers are a problem, I will admit it frankly. I think they should be reined in. But there is definitely a piece to be had over the two-state solution with both countries living side by side in security. That's my point of view, anyway.
Well, I agree with you that a one-state solution, I agree at the moment, that a one-state solution is more fantasy than possibility right now. But to be honest, the state, or the land known as Israel and Palestine, the land that the Israelis call Israel, Judea, and Samaria, already is a single state. It's a single state, but Israel uses language to deceive people into believing it is not a single state, because Israel wants the world to believe that it is a democracy, which it is not, even within the 1948 borders, because it's an ethnocracy. Palestinians within the state of Israel do not have the same rights as Jews within 1948 Israel. But really, the boundaries of Israel, the borders of Israel, are undefined, but they change the movement of Jewish settlers. So if a group of Jews, a very small group of Jews, establishes an outpost in the West Bank, suddenly that becomes part of Israel. Those Jews receive the same rights of citizenship as Jews within 1948 Israel. And even though Palestinians right nearby, or the Palestinians they may be kicked off of their land, did not have those rights of citizenship. So really, Israel is currently a single state, but it's a single apartheid-like single state. And Richie, I disagree with you when you say there's no voice of moderation. But most Palestinians, even Hamas, are starting from the point of view that they accept Israel, the state of Israel on the 1948 borders. In other words, they're starting from a point of view that they are willing to accept the loss of 78% of British mandates.
So can I ask a quick question, Rich? Sorry, because something just like popped into my head thinking that. If they are actually starting to do, if you're saying that they're actually starting to take that point of view, and Richie's saying that Israel has been always willing to sit down at the negotiating table, then why is it turning into another firefight with missiles and stuff? Why aren't they just simply going and sitting at a table and talking to one another? If what Richie's saying is that Israel is interested in having peace, and you're saying that Hamas is trying to come from the standpoint of wanting to recognize Israel, then why wouldn't they just start sitting at the table as
Max, you're not listening. I didn't say that Hamas was starting from the point of wanting to recognize Israel. Richie is correct. Hamas is not willing to recognize Israel, but I'm explaining why they're not willing to recognize Israel. However, Hamas has offered a long-term truce based on the 67 borders, and Hamas has also said that they would accept the will of the Palestinian people in a vote. However, Richie, I'm telling you, I'm not just disagreeing with Richie. I am saying that it is not true that Israel wants to negotiate in good faith. Israel has always used negotiation as a tactic to fool the world, to deceive the world into believing that it wants peace, because it has to do that to maintain its supporter base, like Richie being one of its supporters. But the real truth is that the negotiations have only been used to prevent peace. While they're negotiating, they're gobbling up more and more territory. And what Mahmoud Abbas and Fatah have done now is they finally decided, after bending over backwards Israel and basically being Israel's proxy in the Palestinian territory, what Abbas and his people have decided is, we will not negotiate with Israel until they stop building settlements on the land we are supposed to be negotiating over. Because they know that it's been a fight. The only reason the Palestinians have always had to enter into these negotiations, because otherwise they become demonized by the Israeli government as being resistant to peace, which when it is exactly the Israeli government that is resistant to peace. So the Palestinians have always had to play this game where they have to enter in negotiations where they know there is no chance for peace. I mean, even Tzipi Livni admitted it, and even Tzipi Livni admitted that Israel was taking more and more land, and that when the Palestinians wanted peace, Israel was going to say to them, sorry, we've already taken the land, so you can't even have a state. Israel has never recognized the Palestinian right to a state, except recently, when Benjamin Netanyahu, the most right-wing Israeli minister in history, said that the Palestinians had a right to a state, and he only said that for political purposes, because he is doing everything he can to support the settlers in gobbling up more and more land. It's all, it's the most documented conflict in human history, the most legally documented conflict, and people do not do their research. Instead, they believe the bullshit that they are being told by the people who are committing the crimes.
Right. Go ahead, Richie.
Okay, so what about the 10-month settlement freeze, that there was no settlement, and there was no settlement building? What happened then? Did the Palestinians, did they change they come to the negotiating table in that time? No, they didn't. Nothing changed at all.
Nothing changed on the Israeli side. The Israeli side has been very consistent in gobbling up more and more land. Every prime minister has built more and more settlements than the previous prime minister. Even Yitzhak Rabin built more settlements than any prime minister prior to him.
Rich, can I ask you a question on this settlements issue?
Yeah.
So my question, like I've often asked, like Israeli, pro-Israelis, like, are Palestinians able to live inside these settlements? And the answer is no. And like ultimately, if it was a one-state solution that people need to go by, I mean, do you think the idea should be that Palestinians should be granted the right to freely travel within Israel and be freely able to live inside of these settlements? And would that be the idea behind the one-state solution, do you think? Because they're obviously being built and they're nice facilities, but yet if only Israelis can use them, then there's a problem.
I can't hear you, Matt.
Do you hear what I'm saying? Richie, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
No, I hear you.
I'm still wondering why Rich hasn't answered the thing about Mahmoud Abbas chanting the Palestinian flag and all the maps and everything, that they don't recognize any Israeli town on a Palestinian map. For them, Palestine includes Tel Aviv, includes Haifa, includes Sod and Rehovot and Namle. So I mean, there's an education process that's going on.